Pornography. This has been around since basically the beginning of time. In fact, I think the oldest example I've seen is when I was in Europe last summer and I went to Pompeii, the buried city, and there were pornographic paintings made by the Pompeians in a prostitute house. Well, we've come a long way since those days, and our porn has gotten more and more concerning. And we've also, with the help of science, figured out more and more things about pornography and just how bad it is. And this is outside of religious reasons. Well, speaking of pornography, this month is Pornography Awareness Month, and this topic has been making the news and public eye more and more in a good way. In fact, it's not just been Kanye West who's brought up pornography, but also some very large companies have recently pulled out of advertising with the world's largest free porn site. So, this episode is all about pornography, and we're going to talk about how porn hurts your relationships, your sex drive, your quality of life, and so much more. Plus, we're going to talk about where you need to go if you do have an issue with pornography, you or a friend, and also what do you do to keep your children away from the harms of pornography. All that and more on this episode of Deconstructing the Culture. I am your host, Elisa Steele. Alrighty, so we're going to go ahead and address the elephant in the room, and that is, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that I am wearing a shirt that says porn. In fact, in full, you can see it says porn kills love. This is an awesome shirt. I also have this in red and white, and my husband has it in teal and white. It's a great shirt. Holy cow, I could spend an entire podcast episode of just the days when I've worn this shirt and had really fantastic conversations with women in the grocery store, or me and my husband having conversations with people who just stop us at a local restaurant. Whatever it is, whenever me and my husband wear these shirts, we end up having really great constructive conversations about the harms of pornography. And I'm going to say I wear a lot of bold shirts, including pro-life ones and capitalism ones. And this is the only shirt that I can say consistently every single time I wear it, I get stopped and have a conversation about it. So it's a really great cultural change tool. And if you are passionate about the subject like I am, or hey, this podcast gets you started in passion for teaching about this subject, then definitely go check out Fight the New Drug, and you can order your own Porn Kills Love t-shirt. Also, you're going to notice, if you are a longtime follower of mine on Instagram, my Instagram's Conservative Babes, you're going to have noticed that I post shirts occasionally of me wearing various Fight the New Drug shirts. You'll see me tag them all the time. Or else, if you're a longtime podcast listener, congrats. You've made it in past a whole year of listening to my podcast. I hope you've been entertained. If you haven't been, don't tell me. Just kidding. But I like to, at least once a year, do a podcast on the harms of pornography and human trafficking, because right up there, probably, if not next to, then just below abortion, I believe that human trafficking and pornography are some of the greatest issues of my lifetime. And they're issues that I don't feel like anybody should shut up about. We really should be talking about this all the time. So that's why I wear shirts that have the word porn on them, so that I can talk about it with anybody and everybody who is willing to talk about it with me. So this episode, if you listened to my episode from last year, great, you're amazing. Please still do listen to this episode. This episode has not only a refresher on some of that same content and those facts that we all need to know that you can share with others, but also some new and updated information. So you'll for sure want to stay tuned till the end of the podcast. All right. So I have to say, I have been more and more encouraged lately about the turn and the tide changing on our conversation around pornography, because for years and years, our culture has been trying to tell us that pornography is fine, pornography is normal, it's just a human thing, it's totally fine, we can all watch it together as friends. In fact, just that show, Friends, the ever so popular Friends that everybody feels like and their dog has seen and watches and is obsessed with, they normalize porn, and they do in oh so sneaky ways, where they'll have one character, take part in a porn video, and then all these friends, 3 boys and 3 girls, can get together and watch porn together. and they normalize it. And of course, they're not showing it on the show, but they're showing the characters, these characters that you're, they're your beloved little TV friends, and you're watching them watch porn together. That's gross. That's normalizing porn, and that's harmful. It has, since that show has come out, and even the shows around it, before it, after it, all these shows together normalizing porn, Hollywood's normalization of pornography has severely damaged families, relationships, sex lives. Have I mentioned families, individuals, quality of life, probably even taken some lives because of the normalization of porn. It is so destructive, and we need to talk about it. So, if you're not on YouTube, just, for my podcast listeners on iTunes, I am wearing an awesome gray shirt that says Porn Kills Love. You should get yours. But I also want to, and I won't get into too much detail on this, but you can find the link to pornography to a lot of different issues. If you're familiar with Ted Bundy, he did an interview with James Dobson right before he died, because he was sentenced to death for his horrendous acts. But Ted Bundy even admitted that his addiction at a young age to pornography severely harmed him and led him on this path that he eventually ended up taking through his life. Michael Jackson doesn't have any of those same testimonials, but it is a known fact that he had an addiction to pornography. Then also we have people like recently Kanye West who have come out about their porn addiction. In fact, so far as to say, Kanye came out and he told Beats One DJ that his relationship with porn started at the tender age of 5 years old. He said, quote, "For me, Playboy was my gateway into a full-on pornography addiction," he said. "My dad had a Playboy left out at age 5, and it's affected almost every choice I've made for the rest of my life." The 42-year-old continued, "From age 5 till now, having to kick that habit, and it just presents itself in the open like it's okay. And I'm standing up and saying, no, it's not okay." Good for Kanye West. Good on him for saying something about this, because we need Hollywood, the rest of Hollywood, and our mainstream to talk about this issue, because it is, in many cases, and I'll talk about more how it's linked to human trafficking, a life and death issue. So it's something that I also find it encouraging is quite a few years ago now, back when I still lived in Utah and lobbied with Utah Eagle Forum, was their intern director for a time there, I actually was able to speak on the first bill in the United States. It was passed in the state of Utah declaring pornography a public health crisis, because Utah has one of the highest consumptions of pornography, tragically, and was able to speak on in the Senate committee next to the founder of Fight the New Drug and other amazing cultural warriors fighting against the pornography culture, and speak with them about the harms of pornography. Since that has happened in the state of Utah, it's now passed, and I think over a dozen states in the United States passing a resolution to make pornography and its public health crisis awareness more available to the public, so more people are aware of these tragic effects and can take action. But also, just in the last few weeks, some big companies have stopped working with I believe it's the world's, and if not the world's, then at least America's largest free porn site, which is Pornhub. Just a despicable company. But in a continuing wave of public controversy, some of the big brands that have pulled lately from advertising have, and this is also made very largely due to some very credible reports about non-consensual and explicit content of victims being posted on the platform and have not been taken down. Many of them not taken down, some others taken down after a long battle. But PayPal has completely taken out, and I don't even like PayPal that much. They're very liberal, but I'm thankful and grateful that they're doing the right thing, at least in this instance, and pulling off of Pornhub. Also Hanes, the ketchup brand, and let's see, Unilever, I don't know how to say it, but they own big brands like Axe and Dove, and I think they do some stuff with that shaving company, Dollar Shave. I believe, I need to double check from Dollar Shave, but Axe and Dove for sure have pulled out of advertising with Pornhub, because they have started to more and more see the links of complete destruction that are carried very heavily. So let's talk about how porn hurts different parts of your life. Now, I also want to give clear credit where credit is due. A lot of this information is taken and read from Fight the New Drug articles. Fight the New Drug is an amazing organization. I recommend it to anyone and everyone. It's a wonderful site. I've been following them for years. Clay Olson is the founder, really phenomenal guy. But you can find a lot of these articles, a lot of these same facts if you want to link them back to their original studies. You can find that all on fightthenewdrug.org or ftnd.org. So let's talk about the science behind pornography. So first of all, let's just jump right into the nitty gritties on what happens when you're looking at pornography. So researchers have found that internet porn, and also I do want to specify the difference between the old school Playboy, naked pictures of naked women or men, whatever, and internet porn have very different effects on your brain. Similar, obviously, but the consequences are far, far worse on internet porn. So that's what I'm specifically talking about when I'm talking about the science behind. So researchers have found that internet porn and addictive substances like tobacco have very similar effects on the brain. So who knew? Crack cocaine, tobacco, internet porn all have the same links or similar links. They are significantly different from how the brain reacts to a healthy, natural pleasures like food or sex. Think about it. When you're munching on a snack or enjoying a romantic encounter, eventually your cravings will drop and you'll feel satisfied. Why? Because your brain has a built-in off switch for natural pleasures. Dopamine cells stop firing after repeated consumption of a natural reward, such as food or sex. Eventually, you're going to feel full from eating, or eventually, you're going to feel complete or done when you're having sex, explains Noor Vogwal, a director of the National Institute of Drug Abuse. But addictive drugs go right on increasing the dopamine levels without giving the brain a break. So food, sex, natural pleasures, we eventually feel satisfied. But when it comes to drugs, there's no off switch. It just keeps going and going and going and pumping your body, okay? I'm translating in layman's terms in case you couldn't tell. The more hits drug users take, the more dopamine floods their brain and the stronger their urge is to keep using. So instead of being done, feeling like I've got my fill, you want to keep using and using and using. That's why drug addicts find it so hard to stop once they take their first hit. One hit may turn into many hits or even a lost weekend. What else has the power to keep pumping dopamine endlessly into the brain? You guessed it, pornography. Your brain comes equipped with something called a reward center. Its job is to motivate you to do things that protect and promote your survival, things like eating to stay alive or having sex to produce babies. The way it rewards you for doing those things is by flooding your brain with dopamine and a cocktail of other pleasure chemicals each time you do it. So your brain is like, hey, we need to do certain things to keep alive. So every time you do this thing that promotes our well-being, we're going to give you a hit of dopamine so you keep wanting to do that, right? But your brain doesn't always reward you for the right things. For example, it produces higher levels of dopamine when you have chocolate cake than it does for whole wheat bread. Why? Because 3,000 years ago, high-calorie foods were really hard to come by, so when our ancestors found them, they needed to eat a whole bunch while they had the chance. These days, a bag of Oreos is only as far away as the nearest supermarket, and if we gorged on them every chance we got, we'd have heart disease and a lot of other health problems. Porn is basically sexual junk food. So the same way you can't survive on Oreos or cake, even though your brain sends off a lot of pleasure hormones, or when you do consume those, it's very detrimental to consume pornography. It's just junk food, but it's the worst kind of junk food because it's highly, highly addictive and can ruin your life. Let's continue. When a person is looking at porn, their brain is fooled into pumping out dopamine just as if they were really seeing a potential mate. Sure, filling your brain with feel-good chemicals might sound like a great idea at first. Just like with junk food, it's more dangerous than it seems. When porn enters your brain, it triggers the reward center to start pumping dopamine, which sets off a cascade of chemicals, including a protein called delta phos-B. Delta phos-B's regular job is to build a new nerve pathway to mentally connect what someone is doing, i.e. consuming porn or eating food, to the pleasure that he or she feels. Those strong new memories outcompete other connections to the brain, making it easier and easier to return to porn. So essentially, to break that down into Newman's plain language, is your brain senses this extreme amount of feel good dopamine, awesome feelings. And they're like, ooh, we got to remember how to get back to this. So your brain starts building pleasure bridges in your brain saying, ooh, okay, we need to have the strong memory that pleasure is associated with looking at porn. So they start building these pathways, and they're such intense pathways and so overstimulated that it starts out competing with regular life, like having real, healthy, normal sex with your husband or wife, or having consensual, good, normal, healthy sex. And instead, it's being outcompeted by other really disturbing pornography stimulated sex. So continuing, delta phosphate also has another job, and this is why its nickname is the molecular switch for addiction. If enough delta phosphate builds up, it flips a genetic switch, causing lasting changes in the brain that leave the user more vulnerable to addiction. Okay. For teens, this risk is especially high because the teen's reward center to the brain responds 2 to 4 times more powerfully than an adult's brain and releases higher levels of dopamine and produces more delta phosphate. Summary of that, teens are at a much higher risk of long-term, I would call it brain damage, but brain changes than even adults are. But adults are highly at risk to this as well. Overloaded with dopamine, the brain will then, because they're just like, whoa, okay, too much, we don't have an off button, or our natural off button's not working, we're overloaded with dopamine. So this is what they try to do. The brain starts defending itself by releasing another chemical called CREB, which has a long name for it, but I can't remember. But CRB acts like brakes on a runaway train, and it's putting brakes on the runaway reward center. And what it does is it slows down the pleasure response, being like, whoa, now too much, slow down. But then we have a CREB overboard porn that, because of its slowdown, it's putting the brakes on this dopamine and this pornography. Then what happens is we become desensitized. And now our brain doesn't get the same shot of dopamine that it once got looking at so-called vanilla porn. It no longer is exciting because CREB has kicked in to try and put the brakes on this overload of dopamine. So now you have to start looking at more and more hardcore porn to get aroused, to get the same arousal that you used to get on something simple, as the internet would call it. Now to get that same reward feeling, that same dopamine burst, you have to look at something hardcore and darker and more extreme to get the same hit. Does that make sense? That is why pornography is not just a simple addiction. It's an escalating addiction. It will escalate because your brain is designed to not have that much dopamine. And so in order to slow it down, it has to try and balance things, but by pushing it further, you're harming yourself, causing changes to come about to your brain and causing some long-term damage. As porn consumers become desensitized from repeated overloads of dopamine, they often find they can't feel normal without the dopamine high. So that high becomes so extreme that the rest of their life seems pretty blah, pretty boring at this point. Even other things that used to make them happy, like going out with a friend or playing a favorite game, stop providing enjoyment because of the diluting effects of CREB. They experience strong cravings and often find themselves giving more and more of their time and attention to porn, since sometimes basically school, work, relationships, all that normal stress, it's too much when there's no normal pleasures anymore, and you have to go to porn to get that hit that you need to just feel normal. As they delve deeper into the habit, the porn of choice turns increasingly hardcore, and many who try to break the porn habits report finding it's very difficult to stop. If this sounds like the classic symptom of addiction, well, the head of the United States National Institute of Drug Abuse agrees. Now, that sounds pretty scary, but I promise there are ways out of that. I'm going to give you some of those resources later. Now let's real quick talk about how porn can harm your relationship. If we didn't already feel like potential depression and anxiety and lower quality of life wasn't enough, let's talk about how pornography affects your relationships. An increasing number of couples in therapy report that pornography is causing difficulties in their relationships. Research shows that pornography consumption is linked to less stability in relationships, increased risk of infidelity, and the greater likelihood of divorce. While this applies to men and women, studies found that men who are exposed to porn find their partner less sexually attractive and rate themselves as less in love with their partner. You wonder why when your pornography gives you the entire world, the entire palette of any woman doing anything, including terrible things and abusive things, and then the extreme high of dopamine that you're going to get from that versus healthy normal sex. Yeah, you can at this point see why that would be. A recent study tracked couples over a 6-year period from 2006 to 2012 to see what factors influence the quality of their marriage and their satisfaction with their sex lives. The researchers found that of all the factors considered, porn was the second strongest indicator that a marriage would suffer. Not only that, but the marriages were harmed most were the ones where individuals viewed porn heavily once a day or more. But it's not just married couples who are going to be harmed by porn, obviously. Unmarried couples in romantic relationships who view pornography together experience twice the rate of infidelity as couples whose partners watch individually and alone, and 3 times more than couples who don't watch porn at all. A recent study of romantically involved people, most of whom were not married, found that those who use porn frequently were most likely to have lower satisfaction and intimacy in their relationships. Not only that, but the first thing you find when you start researching pornography and its effect on sexual relationships is going to cause ED, erectile dysfunction, because over time your brain is so conditioned to the extreme high and the pleasure cocktail that your brain gets from watching pornography that no longer, the same way that supposed vanilla porn was no longer okay, but even past that, regular, normal, healthy, conducive, life-giving sex is no longer enough to stimulate them and get that pleasure cocktail or even that erection. So it's going to cause erectile dysfunction and a slew of other sexual intimacy problems. Pornography is really a relationship killer. Now, let's talk about pornography's connection to trafficking. This is something that I cannot talk about the subject and not talk about trafficking, because this is really important. There are a lot of connections, big and small, between pornography and trafficking. There are incidental ones versus, or such as, it's used to condition victims, rape victims. Frequently, abusers will use pornography to condition their victims, to make them more desensitized, to train them to what they want to do. Even if you read like Elizabeth Smart's book, definitely check it out if you don't know who she is. She was kidnapped and abused every single day for 9 months when she was I think 14 years old. But she'll talk about pornography and its use in harming her. But then there are the direct links, and it's the direct links I want to talk about today. Just in the last few weeks, a sex-trafficked 15-year-old girl was found after a year of being missing after her mother reported to the police 58 videos of this girl being raped by her trafficker and other sex buyers on Pornhub. This is on Pornhub, guys, one of the worst sites out there, if you ask me. Police investigated and discovered nearly 60 pornographic videos of the Sunrise Girl posted on Periscope, Pornhub, Model Hub, Snapchat, and other websites, according to an arrest report reported by the South Florida Sun Sentinel. 2 more examples. These are literally just a couple of examples out of millions. Just times this by millions, because even just looking into OUR, Operation Underground Railroad, they rescue children from sex trafficking. They too talk about the huge connection between pornography and sex trafficking, and the fact that there are over 2 million plus children being sex trafficked in our world today. 2 million children being sexually trafficked. Ask yourself, what kind of consumer demand would create a market of 2 million children? It's pornography, because escalating habits, escalating hardcore viewing, because your brain becomes desensitized. The next thing you know, all of a sudden, what was once repulsive, child pornography was repulsive, now all of a sudden that's the only thing that can get some of these people aroused, because pornography is an escalating habit, and it is creating a trafficking market that is bigger than you could possibly even imagine. I wasn't even aware of this until a few years ago. Probably, I don't remember what year, but I was probably like I don't know, 16 or 17 before I became aware of the fact that human trafficking is an alive and thriving, one of the biggest markets in our world. So anyways, what I was going to say is two more examples. In July of 2007, an issue of Taboo, a publication owned by Hustler, featured a multi-page feature of young women being held prisoner and severely sexually abused by their captors. They took photos and videos and sold them as porn. And in another case, a Miami jury convicted two men of luring women into Florida to audition for modeling jobs, drugged them, filmed them being raped, and then sold the footage as porn online to stores across the United States. This went on for 5 years. How many of those videos in 5 years were viewed by individuals who would never dream of their contributing to human trafficking because they assumed they were watching the work of consenting performers? And that's the case, and that is the truth with a lot of the heavy, hardcore pornography that is out there. People are going to tell themselves, pacify themselves who watch it, oh, well, these are consenting actors. It's their profession. It's what they do. It's an art. No. A lot of what you're watching is real. And I don't mean you as in you listening. I'm just saying a lot of what is being watched and consumed is not performers. And even when there are performers, even if you watch videos of interviews of people who have gotten out of the pornography industry, they'll tell you that it's regular for performers to get in consensually and then be trafficked or forced or raped and to do things that they did not agree to or they were coerced into. So there's a huge connection. If you're not already aware of these facts, or even if you are, you need to arm yourself with more of the facts, more of the case behind this, so that you can help spread awareness and put a stop to these evil things happening. I would definitely recommend Operation Underground Railroad. I donate to them monthly. Me and my husband have for years. I also very much recommend Fight the New Drug. They're amazing. They also partner with Operation Underground Railroad, only they handle specifically the pornography side of this. So next, before I continue on, I'm going to actually talk to you about how to talk about porn with a friend, how to talk about porn with your children and prevent them from experiencing the harms of pornography, and then also what do you do if you are struggling with a pornography addiction or know someone who is. So we're going to talk about that, but first, please, if you enjoy my content, if you enjoy, I'm going to tell you right now, these podcasts are a lot of work. It takes hours of research and putting it together and prep work. The interviews, even more so, of research and prep work and editing. They're a lot of work, but I do it because I love it. And I also love you guys. You guys are the best podcast community I could ever even imagine. You guys are amazing. You guys are also the best Instagram community. I mean, shout out to all of you who follow me on Conservative Babes, or friends with me, Conservative Babes, on Facebook or Twitter. You guys are amazing. And so I love doing this. I love being able to provide this content to you, but it is a lot of work. And I would ask that you please help with the rankings in iTunes and on YouTube. Share this with a friend, leave a 5-star review, write a good written commentary if you're on iTunes. It helps so much with the rankings. So please share this. Share this is No Porn November. That's the campaign that Fight the New Drug puts on, and I love taking part of it every November. So please share this. And maybe if you're not brave enough to talk about pornography with random strangers or wear a shirt that says porn on it, at least be brave enough to share this podcast episode with a loved one or family member. And trust me, it's not weird, especially because I can talk to your friends about it. You don't have to do it. Just copy and paste this link. Send it to your brother, send it to your cousin, send it to your mom, send it to your dad. Help spread the word, and please also help me by leaving a review and sharing. Appreciate it. Okay, now how to talk about porn. You can do it the way I do it, which is by wearing a shirt, and that can invite conversation. You can also, bring it up and just start talking maybe an article you just barely read, or you can do my favorite source. You can actually go to Fight the New Drug, and they have a site or a page where you can find links about how, and they'll bring up conversation starters and different things of ways you can talk about pornography with a friend, and also more specifically how to talk about pornography with your child, because believe it or not, the average age of exposure is 9 years old for children. 9, that's the average age. What about those who are exposed at 5 and 6 and 7? These are babies being exposed to this. And people like Kanye West even admit, and people like Ted Bundy even admit, they were first exposed to it when they were 5 years old, the tender baby age, and it's affected huge decisions in their life for the rest of their life. So we do need to talk to our children about pornography. I remember the first time I had a conversation about pornography, my mom brought it up to me, or not brought it up. I think I asked her a question. I was very young, and that armed me from a young age to know, what what to watch out for. And there are age appropriate ways to talk about it depending on how old and mature your child is, but you do need to talk about it. You can't just save this conversation for when they're 14 and you think all of a sudden it's relevant. No, it's relevant now. Your children really need to start knowing about pornography and the harms of it, obviously age appropriate, by the time they're really old enough to use it in an iPhone or a tablet or computer. So you're talking pretty darn young, maybe about 5 years old. So you can go, I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the description of this podcast, and it's going to say fightthenewdrug.org, let's talk about porn, and you can select who you want to talk about, whether it's family member, friend, child, and that is a really amazing resource I recommend to everyone. Also, I want to talk about, this is not sponsored at all, I just want to tell you, I just recently found this this company, and I'm like super crazy about it. I think it's amazing, and I'm really excited for someday when I have kids, that I hope that this is, still around. So let's support it now. But I recently ran across this company called Gab Wireless, guys. And they basically make a smartphone that looks like a smartphone, but all it can do is literally this. I wrote it down. All it can do is text. It has contacts, it has a calendar, a calculator, a radio, a camera, an alarm clock, and that's it. And even their text, you can't send pictures on their text, so that you can't send pictures of anything, if you get the hint. But apparently it has a solution for you parents who you want your kid to have a way to contact you without the dangers of a smartphone, and I guess it starts for under $100. I'm going to play you a short little clip of their ad because I thought it was hilarious, and I thought you'd get the humor. It's pretty great. So here's that.
Hey, I wasn't ready.
That's what I said about parenting. My son assures me he's the last kid on earth without a smartphone. I know, I'm a terrible mom.
Can I please have a phone?
Yes, Kevin, nagging really worked this time.
Really?
Uh-huh. Ring, ring. Hello? Oh, it's for you, Kevin! Let's face it, our kids don't have great options when it comes to getting their first phone. Flip phones aren't cool, and smartphones aren't safe. I'm not about to give my 12-year-old full access to the internet, and I'm not about to give the creeps on the internet full access to my 12-year-old. Our kids need a phone that they'll love that's also completely safe. Introducing Gab Wireless, where you can finally get safe phones for kids. This smartphone has everything. This Gab phone has everything a kid needs. No social media, no games, no internet, no sending or receiving pictures of anything, no problems. The Gab phone looks like a smartphone, so kids feel comfortable using it in public, but it's completely safe, so parents feel at ease giving it to them. The Gab phone has talk, text, calculator, alarm, calendar, radio, and that's it. They're kids. Geez, what more do they need? And the best part? The average Gab phone user spends 80% less time on their phones than the average teen. What are they gonna do? Calculate? Nerds.
Okay, so maybe I'm weird, but I thought that was funny. And I also thought it was more than that. It would just kind of made me chuckle, but I thought it was great. This is amazing. I legit have been having these conversations with my husband for the last few years about how we're only getting our kids a smartphone when they absolutely have to have one and they're like driving at 16. And now I'm just like, maybe I'll get this instead. This is great. They can take a more high quality photo without social media. And I wasn't planning on talking about this, and I wish I pulled it up, but I'll have to find it. But I remember looking at recently this list, and authorities had even come out with a list of apps that children should not have because they're the highest for trafficking and child pornography and those kind of things. And like among that was like TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter. I mean, Twitter is awful. Don't get me started on how awful Twitter is nowadays. But all that to say is there are options. Another one, and I'm not as familiar with this one, but I've heard that Bark is a really good option, BARK. I think on Fight the New Drug, you can get like a 30-day trial of that. And it's for, if your kid already has a tablet or smartphone or whatever. I've heard Bark is really great. So then last but not least, let's talk about what do you do if you struggle with pornography, or if you know someone or you have a friend or family who struggles with pornography. number one place I'd recommend is Fortify. Fortify is spelled F-O-R-T-I, excuse me, F-O-R-T-I-F-Y. And their advertisement is Quit Porn for Good with Fortify, a free online video-based recovery resource. It's also, it was originally part of Fight the New Drug, and then it's branched off, and it's now they're separate. But I've never struggled with a pornography addiction, so I don't have firsthand like a testimony of this app, but I've heard really, really good things about it. You know, just it's a story for another day, but one of the guys that I dated when I was a teenager, it was my first real experience with someone who struggled with a porn addiction. He struggled with suicide and depression. It was awful, truly awful for him, and it affected everyone around him, obviously, because, people care about you. So I definitely recommend Fortify if you or someone you know has an addiction and you need help. All right, last but not least is good in the world, because I'm always going to end with good in the world. I want you to remember that no matter how crazy and dark and bizarre our world is, that there is beautifulness, there are beautiful people and good people and kindness and kind-hearted people. And so I want to leave on an upbeat note. So something I think is amazing is, if you've not heard me say this before, I live in Florida. Florida is like, I think, number 3 in the nation for sex trafficking, which is awful. So there's a real problem with it here in Florida, which means, what do I do about it? I, as someone who tries to be aware and do my best, I have programmed the sex trafficking hotline into my phone so that anytime I see suspicious things going on, I have that on hand. You do not want to be fumbling, looking, trying to find that number. You need to have that programmed, even put on your favorites so you can find that easily, because you would be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't. Hopefully you already know this, but trafficking is not some faraway issue. It happens in your city, it happens in your town. It's a global issue, and a lot of the victims come right here from America. So something that I think is amazing is, according to some recent reports, last summer, an Indian man was traveling through the northern Indian state of Uttar Pradesh when he noticed a suspicious situation on his train. 25 girls, all between the ages of 10 and 14, appeared restless and nervous in his cabin. So he did what he could, and he tweeted out a call for help. He tagged the India Railways authorities along with a few others in 2 tweets. After further inspection of his Twitter account, it actually looks like this man created his Twitter he created this Twitter account specifically to alert the authorities. So you could tell he's probably nervous he'd be tracked down or targeted. So it looks like he created specifically to alert the authorities, which is phenomenal. So he wrote here the essence of his Twitter message is, he's traveling on Express, and he gives the Express name in S5. He says, in my coach, there are 25 girls, all juveniles. Some of them are crying and feeling insecure. He tags a bunch of people here. And he says, subject to human trafficking, my current situation is, he tells them where he's at and his next stop. And he says, please help them get out. Please help. Which is, God bless this man for doing what he could. He saw a situation, he did something about it. We're all kind of told that, see a situation, do something about it. How many of us actually act on it? So this man is very brave. Less than a half an hour later, reports say that the Ministry of Railway had alerted the local rail authorities to the station. After a few additional stops, plainclothes officers boarded the train and arrested 2 men and took the young girls into custody, according to a report from the Press Trust of India, citing railway officials. A classic sign of human trafficking, the girls struggled to provide authorities with details on who their parents or guardians were, but they were later transferred to state child welfare authorities, who are working with the girls to reconnect them with their rightful guardians. I just want to see more stories of this. I want to see these flood the news, because the truth is, the issue with human trafficking is so big, our mind can't even fully wrap around how many children and adults are stuck being sex slaves and slaves in general. And so we need to become more aware. We need to program these numbers into our phones. And instead of being on our phones while we're out and about and doing things in our everyday lives, we need to keep our eyes open, because there are so many things that and so many signs and ways that we can help be part of the solution if we simply become more aware. Because can you imagine if this man was just like, well, it's not my business, and continued to check Twitter or Facebook and didn't say anything, because that's the easy thing to do. And so I would like us to stand up, be brave, be part of No Porn November, take action, spread the word, spread this vital information that can save lives, both of the people being trafficked and the individuals who are suffering the harms of pornography. With all that said, God bless this man and his bravery. God, I just pray your blessing on everyone listening to this podcast, that we would have the kind of bravery it takes to put an end to this tragedy. And God bless America. Please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. That is how this podcast makes it in the Apple rankings. That's how this podcast makes it in the YouTube world. It's because of your help and your support. And you know what? As much as I love putting these together, it is a lot of work. So as a personal thank you to me, let me be candid with you. I need ya to go share this video, like, and subscribe. Thanks.